we have entered into an amusing ourselves to death moment in history.
It doesn't make sense to me. If there is God, God's supposed to be free.
I was 100% sure that I was sacrificing on the altar of truth my only chance for happiness in this world.
Miracles don't necessarily change anybody's mind. They just get their attention.
And so I had to run with my child on my back, the Issa army coming behind us.
I said, gee, Uncle George, this is luxurious for a communist. Son, he said, nothing's too good for the worker, nothing.
Welcome to Life and Faith from CPX. I'm Simon Smart.
And I'm Justine Toe.
Well, this year on Life and Faith, we've had some big names on the program. Christos Tsiolkas, Tom Holland, Malcolm Turnbull. We've had some really rich conversations there, and it's well worth a listen to those. But today we're shining a spotlight on the people who rarely make the headlines. But, you know, they really should.
Yes, I was inspired for this episode when I recently reread C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, which is this allegory, I suppose, of heaven and hell. And in the book, you've got the narrator who finds himself on the foothills of heaven. Just go with me. And while he's there, he sees this woman walking toward him, and it's like she's at the head of this really joyful parade. And it's so magnificent, the kind of celebration that is made of her, that the narrator wonders, she must have been so important on earth. And he's actually told, no. She was a nobody, actually. But she was just someone who loved people really, really well. And so it said of her, every girl that met her was her daughter. Every beast and bird that came near her had its place in her love. In her, they became themselves, which I think is such a beautiful idea.
Yeah, I've always loved that picture. It's a complete sort of inverse of our normal sort of values, if you like. It's really quite challenging. I remember reading that as well and being struck by it and thinking to myself, you know, I've met a few people, I reckon, who are like that in my life, who pretty unknown, pretty anonymous, but nonetheless are kind of the great ones in my mind.
There's that line from Lewis again. He says, fame in heaven and fame on earth are two different things. Yes. I just think it just shows, do we have the wrong priorities? Perhaps. Right. Well, today on Life and Faith, we're going to tell 3 stories of, well, not quite nobodies, because obviously no one's a nobody, but people whose love for others is really great and profound, with the idea that, you know, if Lewis is onto something, then these are the kind of people who would be the great ones of heaven.
Yeah, and there's some really lovely stories here. So it's worth saying we could have done a whole episode on each of them. Their stories are so captivating. But we'll be skipping through those stories that we could have dwelt on in enormous length. So I think we'll get a taste for what they've done. And just a note here for listeners, our third interview today features some distressing detail about neglected and abused children. That's just something to be aware of. But let's get into it. For 11 years, Diana Aitken has been serving in the soup kitchen at St Matthew's Anglican Church in Manly. But it's not quite a soup kitchen.
I guess it looks like a restaurant. So we set up in our function room at the church, and we have a commercial size kitchen. And so we cook there at church, and we set up the room for table service. So it's not a case of our guests coming up to a bench and, you know, throwing some food on their plate and off they go. We set up tables with tablecloths, knives and forks, you know, sometimes candles or flowers. And our guests feel very special as a result. People come in, grab a cup of coffee and some biscuits or something and sit down and relax because they're often quite stressed. It's for many people, it's a stressful way of life that they're living, especially if they're homeless. So when they come to us on Monday night, they know that they can just sit and relax, and we'll bring food to them. We have 2 courses, a main meal and dessert, and we usually serve seconds as well. So there's an enormous range of food, and it's just beautiful. It really is beautiful, and that's something that I know our guests do appreciate. They absolutely appreciate the care that goes into the meals that are cooked. But it does go beyond that. They are not just there for those meals.
From what Diana says, the soup kitchen that really isn't a soup kitchen, but it's more like a restaurant, but isn't really a restaurant either, well, there are guests, as she calls them. They can come along, they can have a shower if they like, they can pick up some clothes donated through Lifeline. Social workers come along to connect people with government services. And if anyone needs a doctor, the street-side medic van is now available for checkup. This has evolved over the years and all these sort of things are coming together.
Yeah, and one of the soup kitchen volunteers also acts as an informal caseworker, I guess. So if guests have specific financial or legal questions, he offers to connect them with people in the church's congregation who might be able to lend their expertise. Now, we're telling you all this, not Diana, because while this soup kitchen / restaurant / hub for social services, while it does a lot of good in the community, for Diana, the point of all of this is the community.
What has happened over the 11 years is that I've developed relationships with most of our guests and friendships. So it's not even that it's a kind of an us and a them. It's we're all part of a soup kitchen community. So yes, they're very much our guests and our friends. I have phone numbers of some of our guests. We text each other and keep up with each other. I can ask them how they're going of the day, and they ask me how I've been during the week. And if I'm not there one week, it's where were you? You're okay, and what have you been up to? So, which is lovely. It's a very much a two-way thing that's going on. Our guests care about us, and we care about them.
There's a lot to care about. Plenty of people in this community have issues with mental health, unemployment, drugs or alcohol, or they just struggle to relate to others.
We've got people who just don't connect socially, so you just go, how do you manage in a world like that? One of our guests, who is now 62 years old, was shot in the head by his father after his father had just shot his mother. And the father left him to die in his cot. He didn't, obviously. And he survived and was brought up by people from Salvation Army. He is an extreme, of course that's an extreme case, but he daily still, so that's a long time since that event, he is dealing daily with that sense of rejection. But it's amazing that his faith, he does have faith, that actually helps him to know that he's loved and cared for by God. And the fact that he's with us of a Monday night, he tells me over and over again that being part of that community is what helps him to get through a day. And many of our guests are saying that. They're stressed for various reasons, which I alluded to before, and they'll often say to me that they feel much better when they leave Soup Kitchen than when they arrived. And you sort of think, oh my gosh, but it's only a couple of hours on a Monday night. How could that be?
Sounds like a little bit of love goes a long way. I asked Diana what care means to her, given all the hospitality she's been part of over the last decade.
In our Soup Kitchen situation, that to me is about being genuine. It's about really loving people. Caring for our guests, I think, is not trying to tell them what they need, but it is about listening to what they think they need, because often that's very different to what I think they need. And so caring about them is caring about what they think and caring about their circumstances and trying to not minimize anything that they're saying to you, but absolutely validating their challenges and really being sincere about how you're listening to them, that you do care about what their week has been like. And I think the fact that we appear to serve them, that it does go through their mind, why are you doing this? Why do you keep doing this? Why do you set this room up so beautifully? Why do we have, restaurant quality meals, And it does start to twig that, oh, well, why would you do that unless you want us to feel something and to know something about the person you have faith in?
Diana's faith is a big part of why she does this.
Well, my faith in God and his plan for the world and his love for the world seems to mean to me that I should then be someone who loves and someone who cares about the people around me. So I figure that if we as a team of Christians if we can put ourselves out a night a week and choose to be with people who are coming from very different walks of life than we are, then I'm hoping that our guests will get some idea of what God is like, how much he cares. So it's trying to convey to our guests that God loves them and this is what love looks like.
That's Diana Aitken of St Matthew's Anglican Church's Soup Kitchen. In 2019, she received on behalf of the Soup Kitchen a Community Service Award as part of the Australia Day Awards. And justly deserved, I think, Justine. And what Diana says there, what love looks like, hold on to that thought, especially as we get into Irene and Issam Khoury's story. The couple joined us by phone from their property on New South Wales' south coast.
Well, in 1993, Irene was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease, and then, 13 years later, polycystic liver disease. And her condition meant that fluid-filled cysts grew all over her organs, and this caused incredible pain in her back, her sides, and her abdomen. And over time, the cysts gradually got bigger, and her organs swelled, impeding Irene's ability to live a normal life.
It basically impacted the whole body, my whole life. I couldn't sit or stand or do anything, cook or clean like a usual person. Showering was hard. Standing behind the stove was hard. Sitting down was hard. Lying down was hard. Doing everything was hard. So I was basically housebound and just lying down and not doing very much.
Irene wasn't able to get much relief at night either. The pain in her sides and back made it too difficult to get proper rest. And because of her condition, she needed help to get to the bathroom, sometimes several times a night. But Irene had Issam.
He's an extraordinary person. He took care of everything full time. So when we had the kids, he took care of all the kids' schooling, meals, and taking them to school. He was by my side every step of the way. Everything you could think of, he was there by myself, and he had to take care of everything on his own. So Issam never whinge or complain. He just patiently did what he had to do, and he just took over and tended to all my needs. And I could see he started to be worn out, but he never complained. He just carried on.
Issam said he just did what needed doing.
For me, it was very difficult to watch her decline in her health like that. She was always very active, and I felt at a loss because, I just felt I needed to do something, but I wasn't really sure how, or what to do. All I could do was support her and just take up the slack in some areas, and that's about it.
Well, you say take up the slack, but from what Irene says, you were doing everything. You were doing the shopping, the cooking, taking her to appointments, raising the kids. Does that sound right? Is that how you remember it?
Yeah. It's something that you just do. You don't think, oh, well, it's not my job, or why is this happening to me? It's something that needs to be done. We're a family unit. And, the jobs have got to get done, and someone has to do it, whoever's able to.
But this meant some big changes to their life. Once Irene got to the point where she required care around the clock, Issam gave up work to care for her full time. They might have had each other and their children, Sarah and Daniel, but still this was a lonely time for them.
And we didn't want to publish all our feelings and everything we were going through. And some people were aware that we were having difficulties, and that's fine. Others, as you say, were quite insensitive, making comments. But that loneliness came from more than just that. We started withdrawing from our circle of friends and family to some extent because Irene wasn't able to mix so much, and especially with her immune problem developing. And we just felt we were doing it alone, but not totally alone. I mean, we had a strength beyond each other. We had Sarah and Daniel, but we have a faith in God, and that gave us that added strength to go on, knowing that everything we do is not just for the moment. There's a purpose in our life, and it's more than just the superficial. And so we just take up those challenges and go with it.
You mentioned God. How did you experience God's care at this time?
I think God's care came just from the knowledge of His plan for us. I think we're all created for a purpose, each one of us, and we don't always understand what that purpose is. And I think as Irene's condition developed, I found God's purpose for my life unfolding to some degree, developing, and I had to start changing my perspective on life. What am I here for? What's the main purpose? Before that, there were a whole lot of other things that I felt were important.
Like what? Tell me.
Well, career and other interests and things like that. Just the usual things of building a home and raising family, educating the children, all those things. And they're not wrong in themselves. But I think, as I say, as Irene's condition worsened, I found that the real priorities are the basic things, our basic needs. And health is one of those very important things. And Irene was at a point where she needed that care, and that became my priority to do what I can. I mean, I can't do too much apart from just support her. And that's what I endeavoured to do.
One of the better known traditional marriage vows is to be with the other person in sickness and in health. Here's Issam's take on those words.
I think subconsciously we all think none of those negative things are going to arise in our relationship, in our marriage, in our future. And so we make that promise without really thinking about what it entails. And but for me, when I made those promises, I believed it, as I think many people do believe it. The thing is, you never really understand the power that you have, the strength that you might have inside to honour those promises until you're confronted with that choice. And for me, it was empowering in a way, because what was just a vague notion became real to me. I made those promises, and now I know that I can uphold them. I can take up that responsibility and stand knowing that the commitment I made was a real commitment, because you don't always know. A lot of times we just rashly make a promise and down the track we regret it. But there's nothing I regret with this at all.
Issam says he wasn't always a particularly caring person, especially when he was younger. I think a lot of us would say that of ourselves, actually. But since then, Issam has learnt a lot about what care is.
I think for me, caring for somebody is just trying to project yourself, your own mind and your feelings into that person, into their life. Try to understand them as a person and their situation and what they're going through, and also their needs. What are their needs? I don't think you can care for anybody without understanding what their needs might be, and then having that commitment to try to meet those needs. And sometimes that just means saying no to your own for a period. Sometimes it just means saying no to yourself in some areas. But I think the major aspect is just knowing that person and providing the support that they need, whatever that might be.
In 2018, Irene and Issam's lives changed again. After a torturous wait, at a time when Irene's kidneys were only functioning at 12%, Irene received a kidney and liver transplant. When her organs were removed from her body, they were so enlarged they weighed an astonishing, get this, 20 kilos. Imagine that. It's now 2.5 years post-transplant and life is so different.
I can do the everyday things that people take for granted. It's just amazing just to be able to walk outside, just do the ordinary things which I couldn't do before. So it's really a wonderful blessing.
And I suppose you feel really grateful to the donor as well.
Oh, I am. I'm forever grateful to the donor for the act of kindness. Without that chance, I won't be able to be here and live the extended life that's given to me and enjoy my family, friends, and everything.
And now to our third story. Carolyn Stedman has been fostering children for 45 years, and that's on top of raising her own children. Now, I interviewed her for a book I wrote a few years ago. I don't know if you remember this, Justine, but this was a book about mostly quite prominent people, actually. But Carolyn, one of the lesser known ones, I think her story was the one that impacted me the most. It's really quite
interesting,
stunning,
given what we're talking about today.
It totally fits with that. Even if I go back and sort of look through that, as I very occasionally might do, but I just find it a really moving story. I mean, she has looked after some incredibly vulnerable children with tragic backstories. And she's done it for so long with the most incredible kind of persistence and stamina. I find I'm a bit in awe of her, I have to admit. But it all started when Carolyn heard an ad on the radio, when she was a young mum actually, talking about the shortage of foster parents in New South Wales. When her husband David came home from work, she said she wanted to do this, and he agreed.
I knew I loved staying at home with children, and I'd had a second child, and I was aware of people starting to ask me when I was going back to work. And I'm thinking in my head, I don't really want to do that. I like being at home with my children. And yes, and I thought, well, when I heard the ad, I thought, well, this would be a nice way to stay at home and help out somebody while I was at home.
But Carolyn, plenty of women have their 2 children and think that's enough work for me. I'm not going to go out and find more children to look after.
Well, it's something I really enjoyed doing, yes.
And you wound up having more children, is that right, after you began fostering?
I had another 4, so we've got 6 children. And yes, but in between having had the second child, then we started fostering, and then in between all my own pregnancies, we'd have another baby, another foster baby, and then I'd get pregnant again, and then I'd wait for 2 years until that baby was 2, and then I'd start fostering again, and yes, so we've gone on like that. But since I stopped having children, yes, we've pretty much done fostering most of the time, except when we go on an overseas trip, which isn't very often. There's always a cot in the house, and children's toys, and bouncinets, and all of that.
Now, Carolyn and David's children have all grown up now and had their own kids, but that hasn't stopped these grandparents from fostering young babies.
Nobody lives at home anymore except David and I. Everybody else has gone off and got married. But yes, it's definitely a family affair when the children were there, and now it's a team for David and I. So the way we work it, we mostly take newborns because a lot of people don't want to do newborns because a lot of women work these days and they want to get up and do the nighttime stuff. So I'm not an early to bed person, so I wait up and do the midnight feed, and then David will go to bed early. He might go to bed at 9 o'clock. And then he'll do the next feed, which might be about 3 a.m., something like that. And then I sleep through till 6 o'clock, from midnight till 6 o'clock, and then I do the next feed then. So he often does a night feed when they're really little and needing the feeds in the night. So yes, definitely a team effort, and I couldn't have done it without him.
Carolyn and David have fostered children of all ages and sibling groups of up to 3 children at a time. But she has a particular way with newborns. And having young babies in the house, she says, was good for her own children as well.
Well, I think my children learned a lot about what it's like having a baby in the house, and they know that they don't sleep for 4 hours in between feeds, and especially when they've had a little hit of heroin from their mother before they've arrived, or they've been abused physically or something like that. They've come in some very bad states. Some children we've had to actually soak nappies off because they have been in them for so long they're stuck. So we've seen some terrible things that have happened to children. One child who had 3 broken limbs, and some bright spark at the hospital did one in luminous green, one was bright pink, and another one was yellow.
Oh.
But that was tricky bathing that child. So yes, we've certainly seen the sad side of life, but my children got a lot of fun playing with another baby and looking after them and helping out.
Well, did you get a bit of a shock hearing that? It's incredibly confronting. Carolyn has fostered some extremely traumatised children in her time, which adds a different dimension to how she goes about getting to know them.
You've got to build up a relationship and try and form a relationship with that child so that they feel they can trust you. That's what it all boils down to, that they need to trust you, that you're not going to hurt them, because when they've been neglected or abused, they think that other people might do that to them too. There are some children that trust never happened. I had a couple of little sisters who were 3 and 5, and for them that's true. They never trusted me. They were sexually abused, those little girls, and physically abused. They were found in a bin at Top Ride Shopping Centre. And the little girl, the eldest one, was terrified of our large rubbish bin, and it's near our back door, but nobody ever told me until many months later that she had been found in a bin. Her mother had put her in a bin. And so every time we went out the back door, there was all this terrible screaming and a commotion. We have other exits from our house, and I had worked out that if we went out a different door, it was okay. But after a fairly lengthy time of all of that, I said to one of the caseworker, I'm really concerned about, she seems to be terrified of the bin. And she said, well, yes, we found her in a bin. I thought, well, that would have been helpful to know. So, things like that.
Well, there are some shocking and tragic stories here, but it's important to say they're not all like that.
Well, Carolyn did tell us one that turned out a bit differently. There was one little boy that Carolyn and David looked after from when he was just 5 days old. After about a year, Family Services had located his dad, a 55-year-old builder from Alice Springs.
He had been married in his 20s, but that marriage didn't last very long, and he'd been single for many, many years. So the department rang this gentleman and said, we believe that we have a child belonging to you in Sydney. And when we eventually met him, he said he nearly fell through the floor.
The mother, who the builder had had a brief relationship with, hadn't let him know that he'd had a son. But the DNA test proved it, and the department left it up to the man to decide what to do. He wanted to be a dad to this little boy.
So he came to my house, and he stayed 3 days in Sydney, and he came to our house every morning at 8 o'clock and stayed till 6 o'clock, and I taught him everything I knew about how to look after a baby in 3 days, and off he went back to Alice Springs. So he used to ring me up about every few weeks, and he'd say, Carolyn, he's climbed onto the dining room table, what should I do? And so I'd sort out all his problems for him. He's now got the cupboard under the sink open, and he's playing with the dishwasher tablets. I told him about locks for cupboard doors, and I was thinking, oh goodness, if this child survives, we'll be doing well. Anyway, on one of the phone calls, he he used to often say to me, you should come. Have you ever been to Alice Springs? You should come, and we hadn't. And so we were. And we're in between placements, and I said to David, the next school holidays we should go out to Alice Springs and we'll go and see Stephen and see how the baby's going. And this is probably about another year had passed, so he would have been getting 2.5 to 3 each by the time we got there. Anyway, we went on the Garn, and it pulled into Alice Springs station, and there he was with this little 3-year-old beside him with a bunch of flowers, a huge bunch of flowers, and I felt like the Queen Mother stepping off the train and being presented with flowers. Anyway, he showed us all around Alice Springs, and then one day he said, would you like to come to the Camel Cup with us? Now, I'm not really into horse racing, but I thought, when you're in Alice Springs, you do this. So we went to the Camel Cup, and we met him there, and he had the little boy in a stroller, pushing it through the red dust, and the little boy is sucking on his dummy, And the little fellow looks over the side of the pram and the dummy falls into the dirt. And I thought, oh, goodness me, this will be interesting. It didn't put his father off. He pulled out a tinny of VB out of his back pocket, washed the dummy, poked it straight back in his mouth. I said, oh my goodness, Stephen, you are not bringing this baby up the way I was in Sydney. He laughed and said, oh, this is the way we do it in the centre. And we went to his house, and that child slept on a mattress with no sheet on it, on the floor. I learnt a lot from that man and that placement, because I always had children in a pristine cot with a beautiful white sheet and a little mobile hanging above the cot that's played music and all of that sort of thing. There was none of that at his house, but he loved that little boy, and that little boy was absolutely bonded to him. And it just showed me there's more than one way to bring up a child. There's lots of different ways, and he was a real learning experience for me. That little boy would be about 20-something now, so that was a long time ago.
That little boy ended up loved and cared for by his father. But Carolyn often doesn't know what comes of the kids she cares for, which is usual practice within fostering. That can be hard, but it's not the only hard thing about fostering. Saying goodbye can be incredibly difficult.
When a baby comes into your house at 2 or 3 or 4 days old, and you look after that child until they're close to 2, you are deeply in love with that child. That is like one of your own children. And people have said to me, you must be able to hold back some of your love. You must only love them a little bit. But that's not possible. I don't know how you love anybody a little bit. For me, it's all or nothing sort of thing.
Carolyn is 74 years old, and it turns out she's fostered 74 children over those 45 years. For a time, they really are family.
All of the children that come into us call me Mama and my husband Pop, because that's what our 26 grandchildren call us. And that's what they hear all the time, so they just refer to us as Mama.
Now, did you hear that? 26 grandchildren. When you add on those 74 foster children, Carolyn has been Mama to 100 children, and she's got no intention of stopping anytime soon. You know, people would say, surely this is a time when you can just look after yourself and enjoy your life.
And they do.
And what do you say back to them?
I say to them, I believe I'm a Christian. I read the Bible. I have never found anything in the Bible about retirement. And I think that God just wants you to do what you're good at until you can't. And I can at the moment. So that's my answer.
Wow.
I mean, it's so important that children feel loved and secure and safe. And I want to do that for children who can't feel like that in their own home.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed these 3 little snapshots of what love looks like. Different guises and different contexts. You've been listening to Life and Faith with me, Simon Smart, and Justine Toe.
Thanks so much to Diana Aitken, Irene and Issam Khoury, and Carolyn Stedman for sharing their experiences with us. And a big thank you to Anthea Godsmark, our producer, who put the whole episode together.
If you've enjoyed the conversation, why not send it on to someone who might enjoy it too? Or leave us a rating or review. It helps to get the word out. Next week.
There's a kind of a view out there that the thing that makes you is driven by the neurons inside your head. Your thoughts, your personality, your decisions, they're all coming from cell voltages and chemical reactions and neurotransmitters. So what I wanted to do in a book that I've written called Am I Just My Brain is to highlight actually there are more alternatives than that actually offer a better understanding of human beings.